pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dave?
Heavenly Father, as we come to you today, I'm going to start with reading a verse that's one of my favorites, Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. Have not I commanded thee to be strong and of good courage? Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, and wherever we goest. With that, Father, we come to you today with thanks on our heart for the blessings that you send to us. We are mindful today of the Gwen Frack family and Lon's mother-in-law, and we'd ask that you would be with them in their time of loss, but give them comfort, Father. And as we come together after this past week of nice rainfall, we give you thanks for that, Father. We give you an opportunity to bless these farmers more so that we can see bigger smiles with more rain. But we give you that thanks today. And then finally, Father, we give you thanks for the opportunity to express our priorities in our vote with the election tomorrow. And we just ask that you bless each candidate, each person voting, everybody in this county. And we give you thanks for that today in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dave.
If we get more rain, you're on the hook.
Yep.
You're on out.
Lifetime contract, yeah. Well, my only comments today, first of all, I don't think this is going to be a long meeting, but if we get going past about 10:30, I will need to leave, and then Larry is going to take over and chair the rest of the meeting, but we may be done before that, by that time, for sure. As Dave mentioned, my mother-in-law did pass away on Friday morning early, but she turned 97 last month, and so she had a good long life until the last few months. But the thing I want to mention about her, and I didn't look it up, Compass would have this information, but I think she was a member of Area Mental Health, then Compass Board for 50 years or thereabouts. And that's the memorial for her, and that's why it was chosen, was because of all those years that she served on Compass for Gray County and for Finney County. So anyhow, she was pretty dedicated to that particular board. Any thing on the agenda that we need to revise or add or take off that any board member desires? If not, we're going to head into the agenda, and first is the items on consent agenda, and you'll see a couple of there. I just will make a comment. The Great Plains report is on there. However, I think, Dory, did you not tell me that they would be with us in September sometime?
They will actually be joining the next meeting.
Oh, next
to
meeting.
give you an annual report. They haven't been here for a little while because of COVID.
So this is their written semi-annual report, but I just wanted to make a notation that they will be present with us to give the annual report. So what is the board's desire regarding items on consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the consent agenda.
And is there a second for that?
Guess they don't want a second.
Second. Had to turn my machine on. I was working on it. Don't want to get in trouble.
True. Yeah, we've been chastised for that. And Bob seconds. All in favor of the motion of approving consent agenda items, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next is public comment, and that's for anything that is not on our agenda for today. I'm seeing most people here in the audience are associated with agenda items. Any public comment? If not, we'll move into the business items. And the first, Mackenzie, are you going to lead off the report with regard to the waiver on Mennonite Road? All right, thank you.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. So this morning before you, we have a waiver request. Mr. Robert Dries is requesting a waiver from Section 1.090 of the Finney County zoning regulations. On July 21st of 2022, the property generally located at 11815 North Mennonite Road went before the Planning Commission to rezone the property from SE Suburban Estates to RI Rural Industrial District. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the zoning change, and the applicant submitted a building permit application for a 30 by 52 building on May 17th of 2022, and the structural portion of that application has been approved. So Section 1.090 of the Finney County zoning regulations requires that all applications for building permits shall be accompanied by a site plan, an approved site plan. And in your packet, you'll see the Section 1.090. All site plans for commercial and industrial uses are required to be completed by a licensed design professional, whether it be an architect or an engineer. However, the applicant moved forward with construction and has built the 30 by 52 building before having a site plan, rezone, and building permit approved. So to give you a little bit of background on the rezone application, Mr. Dries submitted the building permit, came in to submit the building permit, and at that time, through different discussions with him, we found out that even though the property is zoned suburban estates and there's a single family home on the property, it hasn't been used for residential use in many, many years. He uses it mainly for an office for his farming and agricultural business, and then also uses the property for storage for farming equipment. So although this is a agriculture use, the property is less than 40 acres, so it was not able to be rezoned to agriculture. The property is approximately 3.64 acres, and any property 40 acres or less than 40 acres is not allowed to be rezoned to agriculture. So after staff reviewed the different uses, we suggested that the best use of the property, or the best zoning for the property, would be RI Rural Industrial. This allows for the storage of farming equipment for him to run his agriculture business on the property. So as I mentioned, it was approved by the Planning Commission, and then the applicant came in to discuss with us the approval of the building permit. At that time, we did tell him that the Planning Commission can only recommend approval, they don't give final approval, and it had to go before the governing body, which that will be coming before you on August 15th. We're required a 14-day waiting period for publication purposes. So at that time, we started discussing more about the building, and he made us aware that the building was already on the property. So we told him that it would have had to go through that site plan approval process, as well as the rezoning wasn't approved yet and the building permit wasn't approved. So at this time, his only option was to come before the governing body for a waiver from that site plan approval process so he can finish the inside of the building. So before you are two alternatives. One, the governing body may not approve or may approve the waiver, and number two, the governing body may not approve the waiver. And staff is unable to recommend approval of the waiver.
So a couple of clarification things before I asked for comments and questions from the board. Up on the screen, we have a printed copy of that second of the bottom picture, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? What ours here would be in that blue box?
Yes, yes.
Okay, what we have here, that just to clarify. And very succinctly, what we're being asked to waive the site plan regulation.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
I just want to make sure before we do any motions or anything.
Yeah.
Because we've had confusion before. So that's what we're being asked today.
Yes.
Larry, I'm going to turn to you. Well, excuse me. No, I had one other thing. And we do have Robert here with us.
Yes.
Do we not? I can't see him through the podium, but, yep, thank you, Robert. Larry, go ahead.
It's a matter of confusion, I think, with people that live out in the country, when it comes to zoning, especially when they've used it for all these years for this purpose and they don't realize all the rules and regulations we have these days. I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I think looking at the map, I don't think it's going to bother any sight line or view from anybody else, so I don't have any problems.
Dave?
I also have no big problem. I don't see a neighbor nearby that would be offended by having a building in the neighborhood. It looks like the surrounding area is field. And in asking a question, I found the nearest neighbor is a mile away. Is that right, Robert? So I realize it's sometimes easier to act and then ask for forgiveness than it is to ask the right questions ahead of time. And for that, we can lay a little blame maybe, but I have no problem with this building.
And Dwayne, I assume you're recusing from discussion and voting?
That is correct.
All right. And then, Robert, do you have any comments as the petitioner, so to speak?
Well, no, not really, just if there's any questions that I can answer that you would have of me. And yeah, you pretty well did it. We were running the assumption that once we had the builder's plans that we go in, and that's what we did. And we would be given permits, and it was never our intention not to do this correctly, but as it turned out, I couldn't have wrote a better book on how to do it wrong. So, yeah, if there's any questions.
Well, we appreciate you being our beta tester, so no, no. Any questions?
I have a question, Robert, a couple of questions. How many years have you had the control of this piece of property?
We started, the ground that surrounds it, we farmed for, we started in 1986. And it was a few years after that we bought, the owners requested that we kind of buy this property. It was a liability to them and an asset for us. So yeah, it was somewhere back in the 80s, Dave, when we purchased this ground. And at that time, we tried to rent the house out. And I think that's where it probably had its residential zoning. And it never even occurred to me that, what the requirements were. But yeah, we there's nobody lived in that house for probably close to 10 years now.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions of Robert while he's at the podium? Yeah, go
You're not going to do anything different with this new building on this piece of property than you did before in terms of operations?
Right now, Bob, it's planned to be, we're going to use it in an office, but we had that discussion with Trent McKenzie. And I mean, down the road, we could foresee, but we will go through the rezoning again and everything when that becomes the appropriate thing to do.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So what is the board's desire with regard to granting a waiver of this particular regulation?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd offer a motion to waive the regulation.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded to waive the regulation in this particular case for site plan approval, if I'm stating that correctly, Mackenzie?
For
Any further?
the requirements for it being completed by a licensed professional is really what.
Okay,
Yep.
and we'll add that into.
As long as you and Dory both understand what she's writing down.
Yeah, we'll have you clarify that, but that will be included in the motion so that we're very succinct with that. So, any further discussion or questions or comments? If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nay, and we have one recusal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Next, Robert, I think you're on for a couple of things, but first will be the animal shelter service agreement with the city.
Correct. This here's a renewal, if you will, of the current animal shelter funding agreement that you have with the city. In this is a 3-year agreement, as you saw within your packet. The base agreement for the first year is $90,000 with a 2% escalation each year for the second and the third year at that point. There is nothing else involved in that agreement other than you're just responsible for that cost only.
And I know Danielle's here and has been involved on the city side with regard to this agreement,
And so is Linda,
has been
correct.
involved. But there were not any other material changes in the agreement, were there?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Questions? Again, we'll start with Larry.
Refresh my memory, what are we currently paying?
Approximately 72,000.
How much?
72,000 approximately.
Bob?
I guess number one, we do have a need and a responsibility for having this kind of service in the county.
Correct. That has been the assumption in the past as well. If you recall, we talked a couple of meetings ago about the counts within the county, and I'm not certain if those counts were ever, if we got accurate numbers and so forth, just to kind of give you a perspective of what kind of impact the county has on that facility. So.
And then I guess as a follow-up to what Larry was saying, were we on a fixed 72 for a long period of time, or had that been escalating to get us to 72?
Only when negotiated on renewal did it escalate. It did not have a consistent from year to year escalation.
Wasn't it automatic?
And yet the cost, if we were to provide a person and a truck to kind of do this service, would be far in excess of that. So, okay, thank you.
Dwayne?
To address that, do we not have a specific county?
Yes, you do have an animal control individual that goes around and picks.
That's over and above the cost of
That's correct.
But that person, when they have this critter in the truck, has to do something with it, and that's where
Yes.
I think the rest of the
You're
story.
paying for the operation of the facility and
I just want to clarify that
experience.
there is, that's not all of it.
Correct.
Right.
This is for the
Additional
facility
costs,
only.
yeah,
Correct.
Yeah. Dave?
I have a question about the tracking of the funds. The 72,000 that the county pays goes to the city, is that correct? And then
That
the
is
city
correct.
on to the Human
Correct.
Society?
Correct, yes. So
Only
yes.
argument I have is the percentage of dogs they claim are from the county, and I maintain those actually were dogs that the city folks hauled out and dumped in the county, so. But otherwise, they do a good job.
Could be, sir. Well, in addition to Robert, Linda and Danielle, do you have any comments that you'd like to make to the agreement? Okay. And then we have representatives of the Humane Society here that the operational agreement is with, and that's between the city and the Humane Society.
The city and the Marine, yes, that's correct.
And I know Mary Eves is the president of that board. Any comments or anything that the Humane Society would like to make to this contract or agreement? Yeah, no matter how brief they might be.
It'll be brief. We just appreciate the consideration of you looking at this and helping fund the animal shelter. I can say in the future that we will know exactly how many animals that come in from the county. That's now being tracked.
That's not the point, Mary, it's where they started off.
It's where they originated. It's where they originated. Yeah.
Oh, I understand.
And then I would just simply ask you to, and it doesn't have to be anything lengthy, but just a brief comment on the relationship between you and the city and all of us as far as the Humane Society being able to operate the animal shelter. Is that relationship going well?
It's a very good relationship, yes.
Troubling thing for the Humane Society, or?
Well, it is difficult to maintain a humane society. It's not an easy job, but it's our relationship with the city, and I think the county is very good.
Thank you. I just, I thought if there were any concerns, we needed to hear those.
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
One question, so the city pays an equal amount? Is this,
This roughly represents 30% of the contract, the agreement.
Yeah, and the city is 70%. Thank you, Mary, I appreciate you stepping forward. Any other comments or questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve this, your signature on this interlocal agreement with the city on the animal shelter.
There is a motion to have the agreement with the city on the animal shelter for services,
I'll second.
and seconded by Dwayne. Any additional final comments, Robert, before we vote? Any other comments or questions from the board? If not, all in favor of the approving the shelter services agreement, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. And thank you for your work with the shelter. Appreciate that. And then, Robert, we have the Western Kansas Corridor Developer Agreement, and you might make sure that we're all understanding, not just us as board members, but out in the public as well, what this is compared to other things that we've already done.
Sure, absolutely. Weeks ago, you approved a developer's agreement between the county and the developer for the arrangement, the construction aspect of the project for the first phase of the Western Kansas Corridor. This one, though, although is named very similar to it, is a document originating from the city, and it is actually a three-way agreement between the city, the county, and the developer. In essence, it is a roadmap, if you will, on how to account for the costs associated with that so that they will qualify under the TIF agreement that is set up between the city and the developer. And we are a part of that because the development is out in the country. So that is in nature what the difference is between the two.
Okay. Any comments from, and Danielle, were you involved from the city side with this agreement? And then Linda?
Linda was intimately involved, yeah.
Any comments from the people who negotiated, so to speak, this agreement, Linda or Danielle? Okay. And nothing other than what we're reading here that we need to be aware of?
That is correct, sir, yes.
Thank you. Comments and questions? And Larry, I'm on a roll here. We're going to start with Larry again. Bob?
No, it looks like what we've been talking about for a long time. Thanks.
Okay. Dwayne?
Simply to clarify, maybe to the public, this agreement allows the TIF agreement to take place, but is TIF mentioned in this agreement or just predecessor to the TIF process?
Ask it one more time, please. Ask the question one more
Is
time.
this the actual agreement to allow the TIF, or is this a predecessor to the agreement for the TIF?
This here is in essence that you've already passed that agreement's already been passed, the TIF, to utilize that TIF mechanism. This here is just the understanding, basically, between the city and the developer on the roadmap for tracking the costs to make sure that they qualify for reimbursement under that TIF agreement. That's already been passed.
Fair enough. Everybody in TV land's got this now, right?
Yes.
You might explain what TIF is, just for that same.
Okay. Quite basically, TIF is a tax increment financing. In essence, it takes the increased value of that property, which over the base rate, which whatever it's assessed right now. So the improved portion of that is taxed then at whatever mill rate the county and the schools and so forth have on that, and they then reimburse the developer, once those taxes are paid, for the costs associated for the improvements within the district.
Dave, comments or questions?
No, and I'd be prepared to offer a motion if you're ready.
Well, I would entertain a motion.
I'd offer the motion to approve the agreement as presented.
And authorize the
Yeah, correct.
authorize the chair to
Speak up, they can't hear you out there on TV.
And authorize the chair to sign the documents.
And authorize, that's what I said. You just were ahead of me.
There is a motion to approve the agreement and allow the chair to sign, and any second?
Second.
All right, there is a second. Any further discussion or comments?
I hope this will allow progress. I keep going by and all I see are weeds, and I'm looking for a building and for some roads and things up there someday, so.
And there was a pre-construction meeting last week, and I think you'll see some of that.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Any other comments? If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Now it's Linda's turn, and she's going to tell us how we can streamline, simplify, or whatever the tax sale process that we have in place.
Well, in order to streamline the tax sale process, I need your authorization to go ahead and proceed with that tax sale. The first step that you'll be authorizing through this resolution is sending those properties which have been provided to me by our treasurer that are delinquent from the years 2018 and some of those prior to 2018 as well. And once we send those to the title company for an opinion, just with regard to who we need to notify, we can file that with the court and begin foreclosure proceedings. Once the foreclosure proceedings, in addition, we'll have to publish, of course. Once we get through the foreclosure proceedings, ultimately that will end in a tax sale. And of course, just as a reminder to those persons or those entities who may have property that are subject to this tax sale, there is still time to make a payment. Please call your treasurer and do so to prevent it from being in this tax sale. She and I are in communication, and we're happy to remove those from the tax sale upon receipt of that. Once they go over to the title company, which will happen this week, if this is authorized, the cost of that will be passed on to the taxpayer. Once we actually file the petition with the court, all taxes are due. So that includes this tax year and preceding years, if those are unpaid. So the ability to take those properties out becomes more difficult the farther along in the process that I get. I would also, just for everyone who may be listening, if there is a property that's included in this tax sale that has some special situation going on, for instance, I've had an attorney contact me about one of those properties that's currently in probate. If that information, if you could provide that information to me, if there's something very specific going on that has a very definite timeline for when those taxes might be taken care of, that would be very helpful to me, and we might be able to avoid, again, including that property in the tax sale proceedings.
So two things, and then I'll open it to the board. One is, we're being asked today to approve this particular resolution. And secondly, about how many properties have you identified? I'm not asking for a specific number, but are we talking 10 or
80.
Huh?
In excess of 80.
Well, no, I didn't know. I knew it was a lot. But
Yeah, there's quite a few. Part of that is that we haven't had a tax sale for some time. So there certainly is an accumulation of properties. Part of that, I think, has to do with just this particular role that I'm in now and some of the changes that have happened there. But additionally, of course, COVID affected the ability to foreclose as well.
approximately 80 properties have been identified at this point.
Correct.
Okay. All right, Larry?
My hope, I do get that phone call quite a bit. I've gotten contacted about that. Fingers crossed. I'm thinking the end of October we should be able to, as long as everything stays on the correct timeline. End of October the sale should happen.
Because of notifications?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Bob?
So then with this resolution, it creates a roadmap from now on. We don't have to do this on a regular basis. You can annually or semi-annually have a tax sale.
So yeah, that's kind of my hope, is that we make this an annual event. This is my first time doing the tax sale, and there have been some bumps along the way. This is also our treasurer's first time doing this. So now that we've gotten the process and understanding of the procedures, yeah, this will turn into a yearly event. And actually, in discussions with our treasurer and looking at the statutes, I think probably this time of year is a good time, just with the statutory requirements. I think it's May, at the end of May, when she can declare those delinquencies for the prior tax year. So this timeline in the summer is probably a good ballpark for when we'll continue doing this again next year.
And it looks like it would be a good way to quote unquote clean up the books before the end of the year, so,
Absolutely.
okay, thank you.
Dwayne?
No questions.
Dave?
I have one question, Linda. How many years delinquent must a property be before it's put on the sale list there?
The simple answer is 3 years. And so we are missing a year this year, but there's a long story to why I chose to do that way. But at least 3 years, and that has some variability with regard to what type of property is being used. The 3 years is specifically for a homestead, and so I'm not doing that legwork to figure out which ones are homesteads or not. We're just using that 3 year as our benchmark.
Okay, thank you.
And then we do have the treasurer with us in the room. Any comments, Trista, from your perspective? Okay, thank you. And with that, I would entertain a motion with regard to resolution number 35-2022.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve this resolution and move forward.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Dave. Any further comments or questions? If not, all in favor of approving the resolution 35-2022, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you, Linda. Appreciate all the work on this and your communication with Trista and trying to get this on a more standardized process. It goes on way too long. To my knowledge, there's no old business to be brought before us today. The only thing that I would say under board governance, we are going to come back to the goals and objectives that we started on some time ago, hopefully in the next week or so, or not week or so, next meeting or so. But I would ask for you to pull out your notes and go through and do a little bit of homework, if you will. I think we were into the intermediate goals and objectives, but we can go back and revisit anything that we've talked about before. We can go back and even talk about the values and the mission and all this, but more the nuts and bolts of the goals and objectives that we had broken down into different timeframes. So please keep that in mind and do some homework on that so that when we get back to that discussion, we'll be able to be productive. Any other comments or anything related to the governance process? All right. We'll move on to the reports, and I asked for some specific reports that you see listed on our agenda today, but we'll start with Robert.
What I've asked Gabby to do was go ahead and pull up that financial report. This report should look very familiar to you. In essence, it's within the same format that you receive your audit. Traditionally, this is called what's known as a KMAG audit, Kansas Municipal Audit Guide report, and it just simply provides you with a snapshot, a point in time of where your expenses are related to your budget and the amount remaining. In addition to that, you'll see At the top of each fund, and it's separated out by fund in this one here, the total revenues received at this point in time. And this takes you through the month of June. So you'll begin to see this on a monthly basis. I know that Dory's office is working with the accounting software to where they can generate this automatically through that system. But in lieu of that, we went ahead and ran this just quite simply through an Excel process and provided you a summary. It's broken down within the categories that you're used to seeing within your budget. And once again, it just gives you a snapshot. And you will see this on a monthly basis. And once again, it is separated out into the various taxing funds that you have. And remember, you have a total of 14 taxing funds. So I hope this is of help to you. This is what I'm used to providing in the past. So, and it's consistent with your audit. So, any questions about the report?
I will defer to the others, and then I may have one if it's not asked. But Larry, we'll start with you again. Questions, comments, and observations with regard to the report.
Oh, I like this format. Are there any of these that really raise a flag up to you, or they're all within?
Not at this point in time. And once again, this is for the first 6 months.
Anything else? Larry?
No.
Okay, Bob?
I think it's a great tool. Number one, I really appreciate having the information. As we talked about a little bit earlier, the only thing I'd kind of like to see is a quote-unquote bottom line, a total of all the departments. But I think now, after seeing the audit for the first time, going through the budget for the first time, now all of a sudden we can see what goes on during the rest of the year. And I think it gives us a tool that we can set and look in relationship to the financial condition, department to department, when we are asked for bids or whatever else. At least we have a little better feel of what's going on. So
Absolutely.
I really appreciate getting this information.
Dwayne?
Just simply to echo Bob, appreciate this. A lot of information here. Thank you.
Dave?
Only to say I appreciate this and look forward to seeing it again, so.
They didn't ask the question, so I guess I'll ask it. No, no, it's not a planted question or anything. I have had the question asked of me as we were going through the budget process, how we lump together, if you will, the sheriff's office and the county attorney's office under the heading of law enforcement. Did that come about when we did the tax lid exemptions? And I'm just trying to get an answer for the person who asked me, but is that something that has to stay that way, or can they in the future, say starting in January for the 23 budget, be separated into two different departments like county health is, like noxious weed and so forth and so on? That was the question asked of me, and I in turn asked it of you.
Okay, so your question had many parts. Would it be appropriate that I
Okay,
just...
questions.
Would it be appropriate that I just simply answer yes?
Okay, what did I ask? No, I did.
No, the answer, your question is yes, that you're correct. It came about because of the prior exclusion out of the tax lid. To your response of, are they able to be separated out? The answer is yes. We'll be going through that process to make sure that we create a fund under the proper statutory authority and separate out one from the other, the sheriffs from the attorneys. So,
Because I respect the fact that they are law enforcement agencies of the county, but that question was asked just for transparency for easier understanding. So, yeah, okay, I appreciate
and
that.
I think you'll find on your report that you see today is that even though it appears that you may be tracking a little bit lower than what you anticipated on your expenditures, meaning that favorable expenses, keep in mind under the budgeting process is that we budget to transfer at year end into those reserve funds. And so at that point in time, you'll see the transfer out at year end into those various reserve funds for either equipment replacement or improvements to your facilities. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going on there. Plus, it allows you the flexibility at year end if you don't want to transfer all of that, to bolster your fund balance in anticipation if you would happen to have a downturn in the economy. So it just provides more flexibility within the budgeting process.
You know, one thing, I had a discussion with Robert on business accounting, if you will, versus public accounting. And I think this comment of reserve funds is really important. In business, you have depreciation that you use for replacement of equipment, et cetera. In public accounting, you don't have that. And so in essence, to do building repairs, to do equipment replacement and all of those, we need to have reserve funds somewhere along the line. And with all of the buildings that we have and all of the needs that we have for vehicles, we need to have that. It's not like we're putting it back and burying a can in the backyard just so we have it. It's necessary to fulfill the needs that we're going to have down the road. And I think it's important that people understand that hopefully sooner or later we have more money coming in than we have going out so that we can meet those needs.
That'd be correct. It in essence takes the place of your, what you would have as accumulated appreciation within your business fund.
No, that's very well highlighted, yeah. Anything else with regard to this financial report? If not, other things in your report today, Robert?
Well, once again, as you already mentioned, we did have a pre-construction meeting last week. So we're hopefully off and running on that regards. I know that Kurt has a few updates on review of the facility down at the fairgrounds that you had asked about. I asked him just to give you an update on what the status of that is, as well as where we're at on the various sewer improvement projects, and we're trying to get an RFP out for that. Additionally, we'll begin the process of now going out for requests for qualifications on the proposed EMS public health department. So once we get rolling on that, we'll get one or two of the commissioners involved in that project as well.
Okay.
Okay?
Curtis, if you would come forward and fill us in on those couple things that he mentioned. Sewer districts and the,
Good morning.
Morning, Curtis.
Last week, I met with an architect and a structural engineer up at the exhibit building at the fairgrounds. Had a very thorough walk around, and the consensus was that the structural engineer was actually quite impressed with the exhibition building, because the building is 47 years old this year, and it's in remarkable shape for its age. There is no structural concerns whatsoever with it. There's a few kind of weird things that the building has that kind of had him scratching his head now and then, but basically it's in great shape. So the next process will be to try to come up with the cost estimate that it would take in order to bring in some air conditioning and some more economical way of heating the building. But that was we will have a written report from the structural engineer here pretty quick on that.
okay,
So that we can go forward with any, plans we might have with it.
thank you for that. Any questions from the commissioners with regard to the structural engineer report?
What type of purpose did you give the structural engineer that you're gonna use for the future of the building? What?
Basically as a location for, let's say, emergencies. Let's say if a tornado hit Holcomb, where we could put up a lot of cots and bring in a lot of bodies. in order to house a lot of people for an event like that. And then also, if we needed to set up emergency services in there, possibly to where they would be able to have hookups to computers and everything need to be for that. And then the other thing is that at the same time, by heating and putting air conditioning to it, then we could hold a lot more events year-round in that building. So that's what they were told.
Bob?
I'm curious how this study going down this path of just this building versus the study that CVB and the chamber and you are doing for convention centers, shouldn't they be going on at the same time?
And they are. There's, I was going to give it in my board report, but the working group is meeting again the 11th of August to discuss an RFQ, which is request for qualification or request for proposal, could be RFP, I guess, that CVB and the chamber have put together. And it is a needs analysis, and it would include the exhibition building in that analysis, yes.
Well, isn't there a needs analysis team already coming to the city? Could that not be, can they be one of the respondents, if you will?
It's
The one that the city has hired?
It's
You know,
possible.
I
but-
can't imagine bringing two different troops in
It's
at the same time.
It's possible, Bob, but there's a difference between a feasibility study, which is what's been authorized by the city, and a needs analysis study. And that's what the group will be discussing on the 11th of August. Which direction do we go? What do we do? But but the short answer is yes, the exhibition building as well as the fairgrounds, as well as other facilities within the county, no matter how it's done, would be included in that analysis.
And then I guess the concept of having a shelter, whatever that word means, is the emergency management system involved at all in saying, here is what we see we need in case of an emergency?
And I would turn that to Robert.
You have as many of you know, an emergency operations plan that you have formally adopted by resolution. Within that plan, it specifically identifies this facility as a shelter. In order for it to be a shelter, there are certain things that have to be improved upon it. One is the alternative source of energy there, such as a generator, which that facility does not. The need for year-round climate control in case serve whatever emergency that you have, whether it's heating or air. And then, obviously, this being a 47-year-old facility, does not have the technological advancement that is required for communication within that facility. So that would be a part of it as well. We know for a fact, going back 2 years, we, the county personnel, had to do an awful lot of retrofitting to make that facility workable, quote unquote, as a test site, test center, and vaccination center during COVID. So first and foremost, this facility is in essence, and the reason for the structural analysis was just to make sure that whatever improvements that we end up doing to the facility to comply with your already adopted emergency operations plan, that it is able to accept those and we're not really wasting money. Now, the secondary benefit is that, it can now be utilized a little bit more frequently because it has some improvements to the HVAC system, or it has improvements for IT, or it has improvements for electrical service. So those are the things that are ancillary to the improvements needed for a shelter.
Emergency shelter.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the last piece of that puzzle, we struggled as we went through trying to figure out a way to minimize impact on taxpayers. Those same taxpayers pay for schools all over our county, Holcomb Community College. Each and every one of those school buildings have great HVAC systems. They have generators. They have communication. And should we ever need shelters, they're all in the neighborhoods that the people are already located. I have a hard time not thinking about utilizing, coordinating the buildings that we've already paid for as taxpayers for that kind of a purpose. So as we look at all of these solutions, I think we need to look at what we already own and have already paid for rather than building new monuments. So that's my philosophy at this point in time. Thanks.
Okay. Dwayne?
I'm just tickled with the engineering study. I was kind of one pushing this. I thought that was an old building, and I was very skeptical to pour in a lot of necessary money in it if the roof wasn't any good. So I really appreciate and very tickled to hear that it passed. Good deal.
Dave?
Excuse me. Apologize. I'm sorry about that. The concept of that building being a shelter goes back to the original full-time emergency manager in this county, and I happen to know him. And at that time, we were looking at that as a shelter. A tornado went through and tore down a number of houses, and we needed to put up army cots and call the Red Cross to run it. That was a kind of a shelter we were looking at. Then that advanced or went backwards, whichever way you want to look at it, to let's air condition it and put showers in and make that a real first-rate shelter. But to put air conditioning in back when I was county emergency manager meant you had to suspend a false ceiling inside and then cool the air below it, that not to cool that whole loft area, if you will. That then brings up the next problem. Those sidewalls, I think, are about 13, 14 feet high. That's where that ceiling would be. Now you've just eliminated some of the trade shows that bring in something that's 16 feet high that they get in there now. So to me, I have said, and I'm going to repeat it again, we also need to take a look, if a shelter is so important, at what Bob was suggesting, what else is available in the community, and if a exhibition building is so important that it needs to be air conditioned, what's it cost to build a brand new one compared to fixing that one up? So I think we've got some study room ahead of us to try to figure out the best investment of the tax dollar. Thank you.
Well, and my final comment to this subject, and then we'll get on to the sewer districts, is that this was just a beginning step to even see if it was a possibility, and then we go into all those other questions that have been raised. So I appreciate you taking that first step, and we know we have a structure that could be improved upon, but we don't know what that response will be going forward. So,
Correct.
thank you, Curtis. And then the sewer district progress.
Well, first of all, to bring you up, the last couple of weeks, we've had some pretty good problems out there on the lift station that we acquired from Northwest Industrial. We had one pump go out on us and several valves. So we have put in quite a bit of expense into that just within the last week or two to keep it running. Right now, we still are unsure how soon we can get that pump back. We're having a hard time getting parts for it right now, and if we have to replace the pump itself, it's going to be probably anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. So hopefully, the other pump that's running it right now, we can keep going. So that's the status on that. Now, we're getting ready to go out this week for an RFP in order to have Sewer District 3 cleaned and scoped out. We're gonna have it videoed, every inch of it, so we know what kind of condition it is. It has never received this, so it's 30 years old, and it's never been cleaned one time. So we're having problems with it. We've been having a lot of extra cost with it this year. So that's the first step for that. However, it does go in conjunction with the overall sewer district upgrade. So that RFP will go out this week, and then I am working with Todd in order to get the RFP ready to go out for all the sewer district upgrades, where we can standardize all of the sewer districts together.
And just for clarification, not only for our board, but Todd, you referenced, is our contracted engineer.
Yes.
And Sewer District 3 is,
Sewer District 3 is over east, includes Towns Riverview, north and south.
Yes.
Questions with regard to the sewer districts and the status of where we are? Larry, anything? Bob?
Nope, no, thank you.
Dwayne?
We can still go back to the ARP monies on all of this, correct?
Correct, that's absolutely correct. That's what we have set aside for the improvements.
Dave?
one quick question about the sewer, the system in Southwinds. One of my coffee shop contacts tells me that the pressure on the force main is too high and keeps blowing apart some connection where he's hooked on or has, and that he's taken that up with Ray, your employee, and that the pressures will be a part of the fix. So what all is going on out there that part of the system is the pressure's too high and part too low, according to him?
Well, Dave, that's the first I've heard of it.
Okay, then I'll get you with the complainer.
So, yeah, that's the first I've heard of that. And Ray hasn't said anything to me about any issues we have out there. So
Okay.
if there is an issue out there, I'm guessing it's not very serious.
Well, drinking coffee causes loose lips, so once in a
Oh, yeah.
while, you don't know what, but I'll get with you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the caffeine talking.
Yeah.
But, what are you putting in your coffee?
Yeah.
Anything else with regard to Public Works while you're up here, beside the sewers and you have something
Was,
about?
just as a general comment, did the nasty old rain that these guys begged for cause you any headaches on your roads?
Well, it always does, but I mean, it depends on how you look at it. Because on some roads, you want the moisture so you can do something with them. The problem is it doesn't stay moist very long around here. It dries out really quick. But it actually will damage more roads than we can use the rain to fix. Okay. So the guys will have changed their, what they were doing last week to this week. They're going to be out now trying to repair all the places that the rain did damage to.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Curtis. Appreciate it. Anything else, Robert, from your report?
No, sir, that's it.
All right, thank you. Linda, you've given us one on the tax sale, but anything else to report? And, a couple of those agreements. Anything else to report beyond those?
Just as far as things that are on my radar, done a lot of educating myself with regard to RHID this last week, and so those are going to be something I think everyone's aware that we're going to be getting more and more of those, and so we just need to make sure our procedures are such that they're efficient and that we can get those out so that we can continue to fill that housing void. I will be out of town next week, so just FYI, if you need me, call somebody else.
Not the rest of this week, but the
No, the following week, I'll be out of town. No, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's all.
All right. Then we're going to turn to our county clerk. She's going to give us a little update on the election process.
First of all, I wanted to let you know, in regard to revenue neutral rate notices, we do have a publication scheduled in the Garden City Telegram for Saturday, August 13th. So that will be published on the 13th. And then the notices that we're required to mail out, those have been submitted to the vendor and addresses validated, and those will be mailed out later this week on August 4th. So as people get those notices, we do expect to get a lot of calls here with questions. So we'll see how that goes. But definitely, if you get questions from your constituents, please feel free to reach out to either me or Trista. We would be happy to help explain those notices or any questions to any taxpayers that they might have, so.
So before we go into the election information you're gonna share with us, on the budget stuff, we've got a hearing on next meeting, August 15th, for a couple of sewer districts. Is that correct?
Correct. On August 15th, it would be sewer districts 1 and 2. And then
And on September 6th, it's sewer district 3 and the general budget, both revenue neutral and budget.
that is correct.
Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay, just again, so the people out in the virtual world are understanding that, and if they want to be a part of those hearings, certainly welcome to be.
Okay. And so speaking of the next meeting, August 15th, we will also have our canvass of the election. So that will be at 8:30 a.m. And as soon as we're done with that, then those budget hearings will kick off, I believe, at 8:40. So we'll get canvass taken care of, which is where you will make decisions regarding the provisional ballots. We'll send those provisional ballots down to a provisional board who will process those while you're conducting the rest of your meeting, and then we'll come back later in the meeting with the final results for you to certify. Are there any questions about the canvass?
Not about the canvas, I don't believe, but then where are we with regard to advanced voting and that kind of thing?
So as of Saturday, we had around 1,025 voters, give or take. It was right around that, which is really good turnout. In the 2018 primary, we had 329 early voters. In 2020, I think it was 866, so we've even beat the 2020 primary this time around. So lots of people are coming out. We saw a lot of people on Friday while it was raining, which kind of surprised me. But like I said, a lot of farmers said they wouldn't be here voting if they had work to do. So we've had a really good turnout so far. Today is the last day for early voting. That'll be from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. today. And then the last chance to vote will be tomorrow at your polling location. And you can go to our website or Facebook page, and we've got links to get you to an app that will help you find your polling location, or you can call our office. And voting tomorrow takes place from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The building will be open after 7 p.m. As we release results for the evening.
The county administration?
Yes, the county administration building will be open well past 7, so we can get results out to you.
So any questions or comments to Dory with regard to the revenue neutral or election information? Larry?
No, no questions.
No, thank you.
Dwayne? And Dave?
Oh, appreciate her hard work.
Yeah, and your staff. We appreciate your staff, both with
I
the
have-
knowing things they have, but also particularly the election things.
Yeah, Finney County has an amazing election staff. They all do a really great job, and even when I had to be out of the office, they stepped up and got things done. They're absolutely amazing. Our early board's been amazing, so we're very appreciative of all of them.
Yep. Thank you, Dory. And then we have the county treasurer going to step forward and tell us a little bit about sales tax and collections and.
Sure. So this is in response to the commissioner's request for information on sales tax collections on a regular basis.
Can you pull the mic down, please?
Sure. Here we go. Okay, so before you have a report of collections through the end of July. So we do receive collections towards the end of the month, so that's why I wanted to include July for you. So there's a couple things that I want to go ahead and call your attention to. The first one is February's collections received. Keep in mind these collections that we received in February actually fall 2 months behind. That's generally how sales tax works. It's remitted to the state, and then the state distributes it back to the county approximately 2 months after it's collected at the point of purchase. So in February, you'll see a large spike in sales tax collected, or sales tax received, I'm sorry. That was actually collected in December of 2021. We did do a little bit of research, found out that it was generally a one-time collection on one individual merchant, and that accounts for approximately $835,000 of what we received in February. So without that large collection, we're on track to be about $300,000 in revenues received from the state of Kansas over 2021. Does anybody have any questions about either that event or any other information about the sales tax?
Stay consistent. Larry first.
So they do this every year on February, right?
No. So February every year would be what we receive in December. Now that large collection for December of 2021, we don't anticipate that happening again. But we would still receive the prior December's collections in February of the next year. But just that specific spike, we don't anticipate that happening again.
Okay. So 22, it was not, yeah, okay.
So
Looking at your chart, I was,
Yeah.
if I heard your numbers right and following up Larry's question, it would have been about 600,000 in February rather than the 14.
Correct. And that, yeah, and you can see that makes sense, additional funds spent in December. So we received that in February. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else, Larry?
no.
Bob?
No, just looking at the chart more than the numbers, it looks like things are kind of just leveling out and a little bit of a downturn the last couple of months. It'll be interesting to see what happens to, have we in fact started slowing down in terms of discretionary purchases? And have vehicle sales been a big impact on the sales tax collections?
Yes, they have been. And we're starting to see a little bit of leveling off. Keep in mind, if somebody purchases a vehicle today, typically we don't collect that sales tax in our office until 2 months later when they come in to tag it. And then we see that revenue 2 months later once we get that remittance back from the state of Kansas. So it's a little bit laggy there, but currently we're starting to see a little bit of a slowdown in those purchases.
Okay, thank you.
Dwayne?
No questions.
Dave?
Bob kind of asked the question I had some years ago. The new car dealerships in Finney County were the larger of the contributors to our sales tax.
Yes.
And you go by now and you see a car lot that's empty, you have to figure probably the sales tax from that business has gone down. But the big box stores, they seem to still be doing pretty well, do they not?
Yeah, they seem to be level, trending up. The car lots too, they are a big remitter. Keep in mind we do collect on person-to-person sales too, and we're seeing a lot more of those as well.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments to Tristan? Thank you for you and your staff and what you guys do in your office.
Thank you very much.
And I forgot to thank Curtis for his staff and the Public Works because they do a great job out there too, so thank you. They have in our packet the upcoming meetings and so forth. I noticed that one thing on there in August, we had the NACO thing, that happened in July, so that can be scratched, but other meetings like chamber breakfast and so forth in August, I think we need to make sure that we try to participate. And I do appreciate staff being at some, if not all, of the chamber breakfasts. That's, I think, just good relationships, good relationship with us and the rest of the community. So thank you for that. Now the commissioner reports, and I'm going to just stay on the track we're on today, and we're going to go to Larry first.
Let's see, the only thing I have to report, I've attended several candidate forums, political forums, and other than that, nothing to report.
Okay, Bob?
Attended the Compass board meeting last week, and it was very, very interesting. Their financial statements are getting caught up and they're in good shape. They're finally able, much as the county did, they have restructured their wage scale, and now they're able to hire and get some people. They've been able to hire some therapists, which have desperately needed for a long time, and are being able to do face-to-face versus teleservice type situations. I think overall, they do a very, very good job representing our county and using our county funds the way they should. The Planning Commission, pretty light agenda this month. They do a good job doing a lot of the things, sorting out a lot of the information. I know it seems like we have a lot of people coming forward, but I think in a balance, they do a tremendous job. Linda, it was interesting to hear both you and Robert talk about the RHID, and we know we have several coming at us in a row. Did the RHID process that we have laid out, is it user-friendly? Is it something that works for the county, works for the user, works for everybody so that it's a very low temperature, let's get it done, let's go build some houses?
That's a good question. I think until we're actually tested on that, and we've got a great one coming up to test us on all of that. But I'm hoping so. I think the Neighborhood and Development Office has done a lot of work to make sure that we're all on track and we all know what our responsibilities are. We did have a meeting with them, including the Randall Estates that's coming up this week, and we talked through the process and procedure that should be repeatable as we go forward. I met with the one of the city attorneys on Friday to kind of talk through their procedure and how they do it, just to make sure that I am keeping a good timeline. So I'm very hopeful that it will be very user friendly and we'll be able to get those houses up.
Good.
Really, the only thing I would add is that in essence, it is mirroring what the city processes are, which the city is going through the process, is also refining that as well. And so we're lockstep in that requirement. Quite frankly, the key to it is in these developments to make sure that it is properly running through the neighborhood development department, because then at that point then it gets distributed to the proper points so that they can be acted on. If that gets deviated from, well, then the thing starts breaking down. So first and foremost, and that process of running through neighborhood development has been in place for many years. So it's just keeping in mind to go through that distribution center, if you will, and the rest then just falls into place. So
I think the whole concept is that these people looking for an RHID are so very important to us. They're our customer, and we got to make sure that we take really good care of them. And I know from the experience I had on the economic development side that we need to make sure that when we land, quote unquote, someone, that we help them go all the way through. And neighborhood development, we've had some problems in the past. I think the staff that we have now is extraordinary, and they've got a tough job to do, balancing the deck that we gave them to deal with. But as long as we all understand that this is all going forward, and as long as we can keep saying yes, but we have some rules, it's going to be awesome. If we start arguing when we start, it'll be really tough. I think with that and the explanations you gave me on the convention center and shelter deviation, I think I'm set. Thanks.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add just quickly to what Robert and Linda have said, we have a point person in neighborhood development who, in my working with her, Myra, she's just doing an outstanding job of as long as people will go through the point person, she's doing an outstanding job of communicating and saying this is missing or that we're ready to go. My experience with her has been outstanding just recently. So, Wayne.
My report basically deals with the Finney County Fair. I spent a lot of hours down there, nothing in comparison to the volunteers or the fair, the superintendents. Most of these folks were down there for 5 to 6 days, 10 hours a day. So a lot of extreme commitment from these Fair Board members and superintendents. My hat's off to them. I think it went pretty well, all in all. Turtle races, I happened to miss that one, but I caught the watermelon eating contest, and I did not, no way was I gonna get my picture taken so you guys could abuse me on that. But anyway, first place was $250, and you'd be surprised how fast a guy can eat a quarter of a watermelon for $250. That was quite interesting. So tractor pull-off went really well, good crowd, a lot of tractors. Concerts were good, well-received, from the dueling pianos to the 2 concerts that were there. I think all in all, the Fair Board is to be commended. They did a really, really good job with this year's fair.
Thank you. Dave?
I have a quick question for Dwayne before I give my report on the fair. This was the first year they had the ability to sell liquor by the drink, was it not?
Correct.
And did they have a report on that?
To my knowledge, there is no issues whatsoever with that.
I did see one martini drinker take a hard fall that probably wouldn't have without the martini, but that's another thing.
I think the tractor pull,
Yeah, well,
brought in a few beer drinkers.
it was a great fair.
It was a good fair.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have much to report. I spent some time at the fair. As Dwayne said, good tractor pull. The only disappointment at the tractor pull is that the speaker system that they have is so pathetic, they might as well let the speaker just shut off his mic because you couldn't understand anything. And that wasn't just me with hard hearing. I asked people around, can you make out anything he is saying? And they couldn't. So if that may be something that we can fix. I did attend the Board of Zoning Appeals for Finney County because Bob had a conflict. And one of the cases that they heard and they approved a waiver, or I'm sorry, a conditional use, was a building that was too large compared to the house. And that issue keeps coming up, and I want to relate an experience we had on this board right quick. Some years ago, we had a person on Jenny Barker Road about 6 miles north of 156. The only thing nearby was a cornfield, and he had a nice ranch-style home and a detached 2-car garage, and then he bought a high-dollar motor home. And so he wanted to house that motor home in something that would protect it, and so he did some research and ended up with a building from a firm in Oklahoma, took the plans into the city neighborhood development office, and it was approved. So here came the construction folks. They unloaded this steel building all over his yard, and they drilled 8 holes, and because it was a post-beam construction style, and they set the 4 corner posts. Then they invited the city inspector to come, I say city, but the inspector to come out. And my goodness, when the inspector got there, these corner posts were 17 feet high, meaning that the gable peak of the roof was going to be taller than the house. And she ordered the construction stopped. And at that point, I was contacted by a former county commissioner that worked with the owner of that land, and that was on Sunday. Well, on Monday, we took action as a county commission to waive that altitude requirement and allowed by our waiver up to 25% more than the peak height of the house. That is the background. The other day when this came before the Board of Zoning Appeals, Trent said the building that they wanted to build or want to build is too big. So I asked a question, what is too big? Is it too tall, too wide, too long? Well, he didn't know. But I'm wondering how we keep seeing this come up about that support building being too big. And if it was on the farm, on the 40-acre ag land, it could be as big as he wanted it. But where we're in trouble is when that gets built on suburban estates or on rural residential. And I'm wondering if that shouldn't be revisited And if they're a mile from the neighbor, as we saw here this morning, why do the rules have to be the same as if they're in a compacted neighborhood? So to me, that needs to, our zoning rules and the ability to get a conditional use needs to be revisited. And I don't know if any of the rest of you agree with me or not, but you agree with me? How do we do that, Mr. Chairman?
Well, first, I think we have our staff visit with the staff of neighborhood development and start that discussion, and then it may need to come to the board. But are you, Linda and Robert, are you clear on what they're asking?
This is one of a myriad of issues in the zoning regulations. We need to hire a consultant to rehaul the entire thing. Yes, there have been the number of conversations we've had with various people at the neighborhood development office is vast. I mean, we're constantly in conversation about this issue. This needs change. That's one that certainly we need to address, but it's not just that issue. It's a big problem. These haven't been revisited since the 90s. Yes, if you guys want me to, I will roll with that and get costs and we'll get this started. Absolutely.
I think there's a consensus that we need to revisit because they have been in place for so long. So is there any objection to them proceeding with what those options might be?
No objections, but they need to be brought up to modern standards.
Yeah, well, and I mean the process, to try to figure out what the modern standards are.
Right, and Larry, I think that's what I'm getting at, is I think we need someone with eyes, a global set of eyes on the entire thing. There are so many issues that come up. Like for instance, Trent, in one of our meetings recently, was talking to us about the fact that all the powers that be are trying very hard to get 4-lane highways through this town, which will be a great addition. Our rural housing, however, has a great deal of restrictions on truck parking. And so that we're going to bring in more semi-trucks if we have that kind of infrastructure change. And so our zoning regulations need to reflect that and need to be inviting to those persons to live here in Finney County and to build their houses here in Finney County. And so that's just one issue. What you're raising, Dave, is another issue. We really need to do this, and we need to do it in a global manner that really takes into account what the city is doing. And yeah, I'm always glad to hear that you all are on board for that. I had started working on that a few months ago, just scouting out organizations that do that type of consulting and do that overhaul. And in the research I've done, that's how most of the counties who have, in the last 5 or 6 years redone their zoning, they have done it through a consulting firm, which makes a lot of sense because it's very time consuming. And so I think that's probably going to be your best bet.
I can report, Mr. Chairman, that the Board of Zoning Appeals approved the conditional use in the instance I'm talking about. But my question is, why did they need to?
And I might point out as well, what applies to my constituents out in the Calamesta area is completely different. They shouldn't be needed to be held to the same standards as commercial and.
Yeah, I think we had that joint meeting with the city and the neighborhood development staff, and I think they had all agreed that it ought to be done. I think maybe just a consensus agreement to go back to them and say, you remember we all talked about this, how we doing?
Well, and I think identifying the process that we might want to present and what might want to use is the proper place to start.
Yeah, and we probably need to put out feelers and get bids, honestly, is probably the next step that we need to start approaching. I'll talk to Neighborhood Development Services and get their 2 cents in how to proceed, but I think we just need to accept that that's something we're gonna need to do.
And then bring back to us what your options are, you know,
Yep.
that we might pursue.
Agreed.
I would agree with that, yep. Well, my report is, I spent several days in Colorado for the NACO conference and found a couple of other county people there in the meetings, and I came away with, I guess is a way for me to say this, that I'm still a proponent of us being NACO members. NACO has such a lobbying effort in Washington, D.C. So we have a NACO on the national level. We've got KLPG and KAC on the state level. So we have good lobbying presence with our legislative branches of government. The concern I came away with, though, and I have this with many larger organizations, even within our state, I have this with a couple of trade organizations, is the smaller counties, the smaller businesses in my previous life with small business get overlooked so many times. And even in the state legislature, you know, western Kansas gets overlooked to eastern Kansas because of the voting presence and so forth. And in the panels that we heard and were part of at NACO, there was one of the participants, not a panel member, but one of the participants made the comment, I'm from a small county, and I don't remember the state now, but I'm from a small county because we only have 300,000 in our county. Well, it's kind of like, you know, in the state of Kansas, somebody in DeSoto and over in the eastern part thinks they're in rural Kansas, and they do live outside the city of DeSoto, but DeSoto appears to me to be a little bit more of a suburban or urban area. So I simply encouraged a couple of the people on the NACO board to don't lose sight of the rural counties, the real rural counties. In Kansas, we call them the frontier counties. We don't call them the rural counties. We call them, like Wallace County is a frontier county. So I'm trying to help keep that voice alive for the rural counties throughout America. But on the positive side, there is an organization within NACO called it's a Rural Counties Caucus, I did attend that, and there were some good thoughts presented from that. The other two things from NACO that I wanted to present, just mention, and probably through our conversations on goals and objectives and so forth, some of these other thoughts that I have from NACO will surface. But we had one on county governance and authority across America, and it's a study that NACO has been doing for the last 2 years. And they've put together a 4-page or 6-page document. I shared it with Robert and Dory the other day, and I will share it with the board members here one of these days as well. I just didn't bring enough copies right now. But it showed for every state in the country, then there's 48 out of the 50 states that have county government, that size of the boards, some of the things that the boards have requirements to do, and some of the things that are optional to do. But they've done this report. It's online as well through NACO. But I picked up the pages for our neighboring states as well as Kansas, and I have not had time yet to look through those just to see how we compare. You know, how does county government work in some of these other areas in addition to our state? And the other one that I think is worth highlighting today is they had a session on, two of them, and Curtis sat in on the one on employee retention and hiring and retention. And they talked about the pyramid with heart being at the top, need being in the middle, and wallet being at the bottom of the pyramid. The heart being care about me, the need being believe in me, and the wallet being provide for me, you know, with the compensation. And I thought it was a good session, and I saw Curtis taking pictures of the screen, and I'm not quick enough to do that stuff, so I was glad Curtis did that. And then lastly, the other one that I sat in on the last day was telling the county's story through social media, through print media, through other means. And I brought home some notes about that we may get into at a later time. The other couple of things, number one is we have a sales tax committee meeting this afternoon, which I will not be able to attend, and I thank Larry for sitting in on that with regard to the projects that we're doing through that sales tax that was voted on, the shooting range and zoo and so forth. And then the RFP process, the last thing I would say to that, Bob, is yes, we have a meeting set up for August 11th. The project got delayed through some personal and or some planned and some unplanned scheduling things with the Chamber and CVB, but we're back on track. And that process is just simply a working group, and anything that comes out of that definitely will be back to the governing bodies of the respective organizations that it affects. And then lastly, just a question to Dwayne. I had several comments, one of them from a family member. Where was the carnival this year? And I think I know the reason, but just for people out in the virtual world, why was there not a carnival with this year's fair?
Nuts and bolts is there's two carnival companies that do this now, and due some contractual issues, neither one of them were able to do Finney County. You have to book these about 3 years in advance, and it just didn't come together.
And so for those who were really missing the carnival, they may return.
They will return.
Oh, okay.
Sounds kind of positive.
With that, that's the end of my report, and is there anything else for the good of the order this morning? And staff, do you think we missed anything? All right. If not, we are adjourned till August 15th, when we'll have a couple of hearings, we'll have the canvas, and then our regular agenda items. So we are adjourned till August 15th. Thank you.